I'm Mike Worlton. I'll be presenting today. This is my stuff about me, but the big thing is I've been on the conference committee for about 7-8 years. So I've seen thousands of abstracts. So that's my qualifications to be talking to you today. Just reviewing a lot of abstracts. And so I guess I'll just get started. Tawanda didn't introduce herself, but probably everyone knows Tawanda. She's here at City PR. Did you introduce yourself?
I did.
Oh, okay. Great. All right, well then we'll just jump right in. I appreciate all you being here. I see that we have a lot of operators, which is exciting, and environmental folk. We are looking to get more abstracts from people from the operations side of things and from environmental side, so thank you for being here. I want to thank our lunch sponsor today. It's GHD, a spectacular organization that I happen to work for and is paying for your lunch. You're welcome. So I want to first start by the benefits of presenting. There are several benefits. It can spotlight your project. It can share lessons learned. It helps you to become recognized within the organization, also within the community of people that you work with. So it builds that network a little bit. It enhances your presentation skills. A lot of people feel, or maybe not a lot, a few people feel that they're really good presenters, but even the best presenters kind of lose their mojo if they don't keep doing it. So this is an opportunity to continue to polish those skills. And if you haven't ever done it, it's a great opportunity to do something that you haven't done before and challenge yourself to grow. So that's a great thing too. You also can receive feedback from peers and go through the whole process of learning and helping out, whether it's clients or peers or other stakeholders. I was just going to share quickly, my first presentation was when I was a young engineer back presenting in Mesa when we were the AWPCA. We weren't even AZ Water. And I didn't have anything really interesting to talk about, so I made something up. I decided I would research water use, water demand figures for municipalities and commercial things. And so I went through and figured out, okay, what's the average water demands that we get from the ACC? Arizona Corporation Commission publishes some of these. And I thought, okay, that's cool. I got all this information on average water demand everywhere. Then there's an AWWA report, I'll use that. And then I went and got some municipal information, and I put that all together and I shared it. So it was just kind of figuring some stuff out that no one's looked at, and I shared it. I got really good feedback, and it was a start for me to being a speaker more regularly at these kind of events. So it was great. I really appreciated that. All right, some things expected of you. Once you decide you want to submit an abstract, we want to make sure you're at the conference. I know that sounds kind of crazy, but at times what happens is you submit, we approve, the date conflicts with something happens. So we've actually had people at the last minute just not show up, which is really not a good look to your fellow industry members. So ideally what happens is you plan in advance. You could get sick. There are legitimate reasons to not be there. But what we'd like you to do is make sure it's a priority for you. And if you can't make a certain date, maybe feedback to the moderator or somebody else to help reschedule you if possible. And if you just can't make it work in your schedule during the conference, we all know when, actually I probably should have that in the slides, but the conference is this year in April. You'll have to look it up on the website, I apologize.
April 14th.
April 14th, okay? So already just make sure you're available for those days of the conference when you do your submittal of your abstract. If something comes up, make sure you have a backup speaker, somebody who can cover for you. All right. Also, when you submit an abstract, you're releasing a copyright. You're saying, hey, anybody can use this information. We're going to share this with the world because that's what you're doing. You're sharing it with the whole industry. People might be taking photos or whatever else. So you have no intellectual property rights to that, right? Because you're sharing it. The other thing is you have to release your personal information. Now, this won't be generally released to everybody in the world, but we'll use it just for Arizona AZ Water Association needs for the conference related stuff. So for example, if a moderator needs to contact you, we will issue that contact information to that moderator. In fact, we'll do that automatically whether they need to or not. So some of your personal information is available. It's not like a database that's very attractive for hacking or anything like that, so you shouldn't worry too much about your breach of your personal data, but we want you to be aware of that. And then the last thing, well, on this slide is interaction with your moderator. If a moderator is getting in touch with you, we need you to respond back. Once you've been selected, we expect that there'll be some responsiveness on your part because we need to know that you're making progress toward completing your slides in time and everything's going to work out. All right. So that's a little bit of the expectations. One other expectation is, oh wait, I went right past it, excuse me, is that you'll get permission. So if you're going to actually present information, hopefully you've already checked to make sure it's not proprietary information that is not supposed to be shared. We don't want you to present stuff that you should not be presenting or might cause problems down the road for you or the organization. Also, I guess we talked about, oh yeah, sorry. Also, you get approval from your co-authors, from the project owner. If it's not you're not the owner, if somebody else is the owner, we want to make sure you have approval from them to share that information. And lastly, if you're using previously published information, you need permission to use that information, whether it was at another conference or something else. Both you need permission from AZ Water and probably from the previous conference to make sure that it's okay to be reusing information. Okay? All right, so now I'm going to just kind of go over all the aspects of the abstract submittal process, and we'll start with the topic and title. Topic we'll get to a little more in detail later, but the title I wanted to touch on. The title is an opportunity to be creative and to grab someone's attention right off the top. You've got to remember that when we read abstracts as committee that are judging the abstracts, we're talking about over 250 abstracts a lot of times. So it's a lot of reading. And some titles make you go, man, I got to know what's in there. That's a really interesting topic. Let me see this. You want to keep it short and concise. You know, there's a 15-word limit for your title. If you use all 15 words, that may not make it better. Okay? So just keep that in mind. It's going to encapsulate a little bit of your presentation. Your title should at least have some aspect. Don't make it completely random. You know, make it connect to your presentation, but make it interesting and maybe fun. I also say interesting, fun, while being somewhat professional. Of course, if it's inappropriate or other things, you probably won't even get considered. So keep that in mind. Oh wait, last thing was, oh that's good, I covered it all. So here's an example. Now this title is already too long. It's beyond our 17-word limit. I can actually pronounce all those words. I'll try. Determination of drug residuals in water by the combination of liquid chromatography, capillary electrophoresis, and electrospray mass spectrometry. I mean, who doesn't want to go to that? Like, that's super interesting, right? You might think to yourself, hey, I'm not speaking at an academic conference. I'm speaking at AZ Water Conference with very diverse backgrounds. There might be people who don't even know what capillary electrophoresis is, believe it or not. So consider this. There's drugs in their water. Okay, that's a little more interesting. Not my favorite, right? Dude, I found drugs in the water using capillary electrophoresis and other cool tools. That's a little more like interesting. You have your own spin on it. I just threw these together. But it's a little more like, hey, that's kind of interesting. I wonder, you know, maybe he'll bring it down to my level. I'm not really smart about this capillary maybe he'll explain what it is to me and I'll learn something. Or, you know, so this is great. Hopefully you guys can see where we're going with titles. Now, I'm not saying they all have to be funny. They don't all have to, you know, they can be just interesting, things that we're interested in. But don't go with this first one. That I can tell you will not be a winner, okay? You throw too many technical terms in, it's just going to be a challenge for people on the committee. All right. So the next thing we'll talk about is the author, and just some brief topics on the author. So first of all, consider co-authors. Sometimes co-authors can bring a lot of value. I don't think you need to have a co-author that doesn't bring value. You want somebody who actually is going to say something and is not just up there for window dressing, ideally. But co-authors, a lot of times, can give a different perspective. If you're the owner, it's great to hear from maybe the contractor or from the engineer who are involved. If you're the engineer, people like to hear the owner's side of it. One thing I can tell you about authorship is there's some penchant for bringing in owners. People like to hear from the owners. So if you're a consultant or engineer or somebody or a contractor, and you have a presentation, it's probably a good idea not only to get permission from your owner, but to invite them to be part of the process. And in fact, oftentimes we put the owner as the primary speaker, which I'll talk about next. So the primary speaker is the person that receives the free day conference attendance on the day of the presentation. And then the secondary speakers will be listed. They won't get the free day. They're listed after the primary speaker in the program. So just keep that in mind as you do that, and think about how you want to distribute. Who should be the face of the presentation? It doesn't always have to be the primary speaker who says the most. It might be the primary speaker who gets the most interest. You know, if I made my primary speaker, you know, the governor, then people may show up, even though he says 3 words. But it might get them interested, right? So just something to keep in mind. I write, this may be all a judge reads. I really hope it's not. But sometimes with 270 abstracts that you're going through, people are like, oh, I like this person. This lady's the best speaker I've ever heard. I want to get her on the program, you know? And so you'll see some of that. The abstract isn't necessarily up to par, but boy, everyone loves this person and thinks they'll do a great job. So that's sometimes, so consider who's in that speaking with you. Not advocating that you have to have another speaker. Oftentimes we don't see that, and that works just fine. It's just one of the considerations for an abstract. The other thing I'd say is keep your bio. So in the author side of it, there's a bio section. You have 100 words, just like your short description of your abstract. You have 100 words to use. If you use all 100, you're probably saying too much about yourself, is my guess. Because we're interested in you, but not that much, you know. I've had it where it's been 100 words used on the bio and like 10 words used on the summary. So to me, that was a little ski-wampus. My own personal preference. Yes, please, Bob.
I wanted to say also on the bios, we also use those to introduce the speakers.
Yes.
It's helpful to us to winnow that down a little bit so we can introduce you
right.
and still stay within the time frame.
Yeah. Right. And it has key points, and we don't have to like rifle through and say, when are we going to put a bullet on a slide? So that's a good point. And I do invite anybody with abstract writing or abstract background to feel free to add to the conversation. I love other insights, so feel free to do that. Okay, so that's kind of on the authorship and kind of the title or the topic as well. And then there's the short description, and just kind of a description of what a short description is. It's a summary of your abstract, right? So it's not the full abstract. It's not a piece you cut out of the abstract and paste as a description, because we don't want to read part of your abstract. We want to read an overview of your abstract, okay? And it may be, this is more likely, I mean, most people read at least the summary, right? So hopefully you get to the summary. I think I would hope, I know the people who have judged in this room have read every word probably. But hopefully at a minimum they're reading the summary. So this is an important piece. Here you want to keep it limited to 100 words. And this is kind of, you're trying to maybe hit the high points, right? Not all the information that you've shared in the abstract. Don't try to squeeze everything down into the summary. Try to make it compelling and a more of an overview, okay? And I say avoid getting into the weeds. That's actually going to apply here and in the abstract. Too deep in the weeds can lose people's attention, especially when you're talking about how many abstracts are being reviewed. So deep in the weeds, we may not read. Okay, that happens sometimes. People are like, oh my goodness, I saw 5 words I don't even understand, and there's lots of detail here. I'm just going to read the summary, and that's it. You know, I may not get too deep, or maybe I won't read the summary because even that's too complicated. Okay. The last thing is, this will be what is included in the conference program. We will not include your abstract. The abstract is to convince the judges or the committee that you guys have something worth saying. But this is what's going to end up in the program. So just keep that in mind as you're writing it, because you want to look good in the program. All right, the last component is the actual abstract, this will have everything. This will have your most important ideas. Again, I'd say don't get into the weeds, but you're trying to generate a little interest and curiosity, excitement about what you're talking about. And you want to make it something that's going to draw people. As a judge, I often look to, man, is anyone going to want to go to this? Is this kind of something that is going to appeal to our audience at AZ Water? So you've got to make it appeal. That's got to be part of what you do. And in doing that, you want to keep it concise. Don't add, if you do a lot of detail about something that doesn't matter too much, you know, get into the color and the dimensions of some tool or something like that, it might be a little more than anyone's looking to read about. They want to know the big picture again. So it typically includes kind of the background of what the project is. It will include some challenges you faced, hopefully, or it could either be a project or it could be research or whatever it might be. Some lessons you learned, some interesting conclusions that you're drawing. And that will hopefully, if it's an interesting topic, get the attention and make you successful. I mentioned again, avoiding getting into the weeds. Oh, look at that, I didn't even, now you can look at what I was talking about. Sorry about that. So these are some of the keys. Now I also want to say all these slides are hopefully, we plan to upload them to the website, so you can always get these on azwater.org. All right, so here I said I'd talk a little more about the topics, and here's where we kind of touch on the topics, but here's some do's. Here's some things we want you to do as you're preparing your abstract. We want you to plan ahead, recognize when the deadline is. I'm not sure I'm supposed to say this, but we get 90% of our submittals the last week of the submittal period. Be good to get it a little earlier. Unfortunately, it doesn't affect whether you actually get selected or not when you submit. But we like to get them early. If you can do that, that'd be great. Choose an appropriate topic, a topic that aligns mostly with what you're doing. You may feel like, I don't really have one that aligns really well, but if you don't pick it, the judges or the committee will pick it for you. So I'll show you in a later slide, we have other special interest topic, but unless there's a bunch that are all in the same category, we don't form a new block. We actually just distribute it among the existing topics. So just keep that in mind, so you can kind of pick it or have something at least alluding to it. If you want to create your own topic, you can try that, but it just depends on how many people have similar topics. Think about your audience as you write your abstract. Remember, I've mentioned many times, we're going to have a diverse, we'll have operators, constructors, we're going to have professional engineers, we're going to have managers, we're going to have all kinds of people. So you can't make it a very specific, like very focused on one aspect, or you might lose some people. So keep that in mind. That's true for both the conference and for your judging panel. Very diverse. Some on the judging panel will catch every grammar error or every mistake that you make, editing mistake. Some probably won't recognize any of them, right? They just breeze right through it because they don't have time, they're busy, or whatever else. So you're going to have this, you have to think about that when you're writing. How do I best reach out? All right. Also, I would say build an outline. Why would you build an outline, do you think? Why is that important as you present this? To me, yes, Bob. Okay, right. What happens a lot of times is, I told you a lot of the abstracts are submitted last minute. A lot of times it's like, oh my goodness, I don't have time. I'm going to throw something on the page and try to get something in. Well, in those cases, sometimes it just doesn't come across as clearly as somebody who's thought through it and has actually put an outline together. And as a judge, man, it's so much easier to read something that's coherent. So it's great to put the outline together. So I would say, please do that. Oh, and these are our topics. So you see here we have quite a range of topics. Some of them are relatively new. I think stormwater is on here. Yes, okay. That's a relatively new topic where you'll see last year we started doing that, and it's kind of exciting to see we had several submittals there. All right, here's some more do's. Do be relevant and interesting. If there's an interesting aspect of something, of a project, let's say you're working on, don't focus on all the uninteresting things. Go to the thing that really was the most attractive for people to hear about. Now, there might be a lot of other things that went on. We had a big project, City of Scottsdale, a lot of interesting stuff happened. We used a JOC contractor, a CM at risk contractor, and a design bid build, regular contractor. We used all different kind of delivery methods. That was kind of interesting. So, I've kind of focused on, hey, this is a great project, but boy, what really made it interesting is how we did this. So find an interesting aspect to the project you're working on and emphasize that in your abstract, because that sets it apart, right? Maybe you had a project where it was a public outreach nightmare. Everyone wants to hear about a disaster. So maybe that's why our news is like it is, right? So maybe that is something you could think about. Oh, again, you might make sure you get permissions if you're talking about a disaster. A lot of people don't like sharing their dirty laundry. Now, some may be wondering, what is create an unformatted draft? It means that we don't really the website you're going to enter into doesn't have real formatting stuff. So if you want to create a beautiful Word document and just try to upload it, it'll just upload everything but the bullets and the indents and all that stuff. So just our recommendation is either you can do it in WordPad, or when you paste it in, make sure you review, because once you change that formatting, pasting it from one program into the website, you might notice that. Yes?
I have a recommendation not to submit everything in all caps.
Oh, okay.
It happens a lot.
Yeah, no all caps, because we don't like being yelled at the entire time we're reading.
Someone has to change that by hand.
Yes. All right, so and then the other thing I'd say is solicit feedback. Don't go in there thinking, I'm just going to write this, hopefully it all works well. Hopefully you're getting permissions and you're talking to people. Maybe there's people in your organization that would be willing to review stuff before you submit it, so that you make sure you don't have a lot of, obvious spelling errors or grammatical errors, or your all caps or whatever it might be. Get a second opinion on that, okay? And it may seem like everyone would do that, but believe me, I'm pretty sure everyone doesn't do that. This you don't really necessarily need. This is something we talked about in our preparations for this presentation, but if you do have statistics, they're interesting. People do oftentimes like statistics. You can't format. So when we say graphics, you can't really add graphics, so you can't format. But you can have those prepared for what's coming up and work your abstract around that stuff. Just do it. All right. So this is really important. Don't be condescending, pedantic, or esoteric. People hate that, right? And I've just shown you exactly what it means to be condescending, pedantic, and esoteric all at the same time. So try not to get really fancy. We don't need to see heretofore in your abstract, right? It's a great word, but we're trying to shrink the amount of words we're reading, right? So if you use really esoteric language, it doesn't really help. Also, if you're condescending, like we are the best and this is the only way you can do it, people may say, well, actually, I've done this before and that's not the only way you can do it. It's a little condescending for you to say that to me. Okay, so keep that in mind, right? That you are not necessarily the only expert in something. It's great to come across as an expert, but just be aware there are other experts that may be on the panel. So pedantic, just not too much. Don't say too many words. All right. I mentioned earlier, don't copy and paste. We try to avoid that. If you've written a big long paper and you're like, hey, I can make this into an abstract, copy sentence 4, copy sentence 17, let's juggle it together. It doesn't necessarily come across really well. Try to start from the outline phase and then work your way into it. Don't just copy and paste a bunch of junk. That is a service to your reviewers. We really appreciate it when you don't do that, so thank you. There's also kind of a rule, and you'll see it on the sheets we handed out. Try not to make it a sales pitch. If you're selling like, we have the best software product, actually, coincidentally, we developed it. And let me tell you all about this product that we developed. I'm pretty sure there's going to be a few people scoring you 0 on the committee. I know a couple that will religiously put zeros, and Bob's pointing at himself. Okay, they don't like you here. Now there is a place for that. We have some vendors tracks that you say, hey, I'm doing vendors. We'll show you on the website, but try not to overly inflate what you do and sell your stuff versus just being, giving a whole perspective of the project or the research or whatever you're doing. Lastly, don't waste word count. So this is an interesting little graphic. You can see that the top 50 accepted abstracts had 245 words out of 400. So not even really close to the max. You don't necessarily have to have 400 words, and I don't think that's necessarily going to get you considered any farther. But the lower selections only had 211. So the last 50, the lowest 50 abstracts had 40 less words, 44 words, 43, something like 30? Yeah, 30. Did I say 30? 34 extra less words. Okay, math on the spot. So that's something to keep in mind. And you can see too, there's a reduction also in the summaries. We have seen some that are like 2 sentences long, maybe 3. Have you seen that, Bob? They generally don't do well. There are occasions where people can get away with that, but it's very rare. I think I got selected one year because I wrote a presentation on how awesome the selection committee is for this project. And it was just a test. They scored me really high, but I was just testing the website to make sure it worked, but I got selected. I didn't speak, just to clarify. All right. So I wanted to show you the actual banner ad. I'm going to actually click on this. So everyone has been to have you been to the AZ Water website before? So you know where that's at. You'll see this on the AZ Water website. What I'm going to do here, if this is working, okay. Dexterity in place. All right. This is where it will take you. If you click on that banner ad, it takes you to this point. Your abstracts are due the 11th of October, so I'm glad you're here already thinking about them. A good point came up, by the way, from a client that I talked to. She's like, I don't know if I really need to be at the workshop because I always have my consultant write it for me. Right? So if you are a client, that is a trick you can use. Bring your consultants in who love to do work for free for their clients. So, all right. So here it gives you. I would recommend, and it's on my slide, that you read through these, understand what you're doing. Some of this may be rehashed of what I'm talking about. Really, we don't. It shows here we don't want duplicate submittals. If you submit multiple times, we just have to weed that out. It's a lot of work. It really is a lot of work, and we're all volunteers. There's no professional reviewer here. So just keep that in mind and have mercy on us. All right, so here's our click to submit abstract. It's going to take you to this new program. It's new this year. You're going to come in here, and it gives you the options of making a submission, editing the submission, or even withdrawing the submission. As long as it's before the due date, you can click on any of those. We're going to click on Make the Submission. And normally, if you can click it, there we go. Okay. So we talked about the authors. Here's the biography. Remember, you have 100 words, but you don't have to use all 100. You might have you're going to pick a primary author. You can have alternate. I list as many alternates as you feel like you have. You can do that here, but you'll also need to give. So author 1, you're going to have a chance to add more. Right there's add author. Okay, so you can add more authors. You're going to give information about everyone. Submission title, 15 words. I talked about that. Summary, we talked about is 100 words, where you're trying to really get it easy. Then you come in here and you say, okay, what am I going to click? Which topic most closely aligns with what I'm talking about? And you're going to pick this as your topic area, and then there's a separate drop down once you've of stuff within the topic area. Well, actually, it looks like the same things. So if you pick that, you can double it up, I guess. So you can pick 2. Here's your abstract. Again, I said it won't have, you can see here, it's just a box, a text box. So it's just going to receive text. It will get carriage returns, periods, spacing, stuff like that. But you're not going to get a lot of fancy stuff in there. And then down here is some of the things we talked about. Well, I guess we didn't talk about all of them. They ask about, do you want to submit in other places? Do you want to be considered for maybe a lunch thing or another talk somewhere? Do you want to be in a Kachina article? So lots of opportunities for you to get some exposure for the work that you've done. Are you in the fresh ideas category, fewer than 10 years of experience? Okay. And then the vendors and manufacturers part, remember I said that we don't like sales pitches, except if you have something innovative or interesting. That's our vendors and manufacturers piece, okay? Down here is where you write away all your rights of copyright and releasing information, personal information, and things like that, okay? So that's just kind of the mechanics of getting through there. It's really quite a self-directed form and hopefully self-explanatory. But if you have questions, we're always available to help. All right, back to, okay. All right, so I'm just going to go through. You have a sheet of paper in front of you. It's the AZ Water 2019 conference scoring kind of criteria. Okay, so that piece of paper is what we get every year. There's going to be a 2021 come out, and it may say something a little different, but as a judge, that's what I look at to make sure I'm being fair. Here's the ratings. So 0, this abstract is not applicable at all to our conference. Somebody's talking about how to make a pair of shoes. We don't really make shoes in our industry. I don't really want to accept that into the abstract. So we rarely get those. Sometimes I see 0s on sales presentations, but really, even sales, sometimes they should get a 1, because they're just a poor abstract. Then it's kind of below average. It's kind of hard to guess, right? Like we don't really It's not very defined what below average is. It's based on your view of all the abstracts, where does it fall? Average abstract with an interesting topic would be a 3. Like, hey, it's an okay, it's not well written necessarily, and it could be a lot more spicy, but it's interesting. I could watch this, so I'll give you a 3. 4 is like, wow, this would be a good topic. I'd be interested in hearing about this and seeing this at the conference. And if you have a 4, if your average score is a 4, you're probably going to get in. Cutoff scores are probably more in the 2.7 range, 2.6, somewhere in that range. A great abstract that must be included is a 5. So if you have just an outstanding abstract, and sometimes we'll see that where it's like, hey, this speaker is, we know the speaker, they're amazing, they've got this great topic they're going to talk about, it's very relevant, we got to have this person. We're going to put them in a 5. Yeah, Bob.
I also use that to identify timely topics.
Okay, Bob.
Of most current events,
Okay.
current issues.
So Bob has a bias toward timely topics and current events, which is good.
That's one thing I do look for.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I think it's,
Very few 5s.
yeah, I understand that. He's a hard judge. Is that true, Amy? He's a tough guy.
Yeah.
Real critic. Okay. All right. Well, that's good. Thank you for pointing that out. Okay. So here's some of the rules of engagements for judges. Multiple presentations are okay. You can submit 10 if you want, but we're only going to select 1. You could have 10 that rank 1 through 10. We'll actually select them all, but you can't present them all. So someone else is going to have to do that for you. So if you're thinking, man, I got all these great ideas, I want to make all these presentations, you can do it. You might want to think about who's going to be presenting them all, if they're good. We won't exclude you. You have the chance to be selected for everything, but you can only present 1. Okay? We don't think that's fair to our other speakers to have somebody. I mean, if you got a really good speaker and he does 20 sessions, it eats up a lot of real estate for other people. All right. So the other thing is location. Now this is interesting. Out-of-state papers do not get penalized. So if somebody's writing about out-of-state, now there's an inherent penalty sometimes for people like, I don't really care about a project in Oklahoma. That may happen in a judge's mind, but we're not going to penalize someone just for being out-of-state. A lot of times out-of-state people come to speak about Arizona projects, right? So just something to be aware of, okay? The other thing is when there is a conflict of interest. So let's say I work for GHD and we've submitted 7 abstracts and I'm sitting here reviewing. I have to actually enter a 0. Now sometimes this is tricky, right? Because you could, if the primary author is not from GHD, nobody would know better. But we rely on the ethics of our committee to not, if you're involved in the project or it's your firm submitting, then we, or your agency submitting, then we don't judge. We try to leave that one blank and let the rest of the judges fill in.
Things like that, I think we don't grade it all.
Right, you don't grade it. We just don't grade those specific ones. So I may have 20 that are, and we're not going to have 20. We have 7, let's say. And so I have to not grade 7 of the 270 that come in. So somebody else will have to do the work on those. Okay, that's how that should work. So just keep you aware of that. Oh my goodness. Oh yeah, that doesn't change. Thank you. Did I already go did you guys see all that, I hope?
You talked through it.
Okay. I probably sounded really smart, like, wow, how does he remember all that stuff? All right, sorry, I have 2 different shows going here. I'm doing a video conference right now. Okay. All right, some other things that we want you to know about. There are extra credit points. So we really like case studies. That's oftentimes given extra credit. And case study is something where, hey, I've got this lesson learned, this project that I did, and it's something you can all learn from, and we're going to give you different perspectives about it. Here's some background. We get a lot of these, and we really like it. It's great. So for example, if you're working on a wastewater treatment plant and you upgraded the influent trash rack and it's really interesting stuff, and you brought in your contractor who is like, wow, this is really hard because you wouldn't believe the kind of trash that was coming into this treatment plant. I pulled out a mattress and 4 logs or whatever. And that to me, although it's not super technically interesting, it's interesting. Like people want to go like, how did you get a mattress in there? That draws some eyes, right? But it's getting a contractor. It's also getting, the owner, and maybe you get the engineer. That'll oftentimes rise to the top for people. Operator-sponsored abstracts. A lot of times when we see an operator as the primary author, we go, hey, this is good. Because we want to elevate the operations folks. We want them to be part of our conference and to feel like they have a place in the conference. And so, and we know they have great things to say, and they say them differently sometimes, which is also awesome. So we want all that. We find we get a lot more non-operator abstracts, so we're trying to even the balance out. That's something we'd like to see. Then there's some committee endorsed. And when I say committee, it's not the judges endorsed. It's, hey, the Stormwater Committee has endorsed a speaker. They've sent an email along saying, hey, we really want to see somebody come in. We've asked this person to do an abstract, and so you expect it to come in. Please take this into account that it's something we've requested. And so then, the committee will be told, hey, these have been requested by different committees. Take it into account. And sometimes we actually deal out the abstract review and prioritization to committees. So water treatment might get their own abstract review because we have, we've aligned these 10 water treatment abstracts. They can, we'll do the initial ranking, but then they'll say, well, this is how we want to organize them, and these are the ones we think are really good, and maybe we should keep this one out. All right, so that's on that. This is an interesting graph, and it may not make a lot of sense to people who know graphs and numbers. So you can see that we have 233%. So percent accepted, percent not accepted. Doesn't make a lot of sense, right? It's how the numbers were presented to me. So what I would say is we expected to get 3 submittals of lab practices. Okay? We accepted 100% of those 3, but there were way more than that. So we had to we rejected actually a good percentage, 133%. There weren't 3. There were probably like 9 or 7 or 8 or something like that. So we rejected 133%, okay, of this number of 3, okay? So we got, sorry, that's confusing, right? Yes, it was confusing to me. I called the guy, the source of the data on the way up here. I'm like, can you make sure I'm doing this right? Because it's a little weird. So here we have 150. What I want to point out is if you look at the very end over here, it's going from the least allotted spots to the most. And the reason we have the most allotted spots for wastewater treatment and water treatment is because that's where we get the most abstracts. So we've just historically said, wow, we're getting a lot of abstracts, let's allot this many spots. We'll assume it. And then what will really happen is we get a ton of abstracts in those 2 categories, and then we start filling out our program. Really, our program's dictated by the number of abstracts we get in certain categories. And just for your information, blocks are made up of 3 speakers or 4 speakers, okay? So if it turns out, we need a 3-speaker and a 4-speaker block, somebody may be bumped from one category to another because we don't have enough space in the block to fit that particular abstract, okay? But it does give you kind of an idea where the most competition is the water and wastewater treatment. We got so many of them, although I shouldn't say the most competition because there weren't as many rejected. Water distribution had a lot of rejects, 67. And some of those were reassigned to other topics. What happens sometimes is someone will say, this is a water distribution topic, when we really say, no, that's an energy and sustainability project because you're talking about, this meter that is a turbine, or something like that. So just keep that in mind as well. All right, this is where I think it's supposed to be more fun and interactive. What we want to do, if you've brought an abstract, we'd be very happy to have a look at it and review that a little bit and give you some feedback. I know that was something we offered in the announcement. I suspect most did not, since usually we get 90% of the abstracts the week before. So if you haven't brought one, what we'd like you to do is maybe discuss among those around you some topics that you might think are good topics and might want to share. Think about how you might phrase those topics or information you might include in an abstract, okay? And maybe that's just to that's just to help each other to boil it up top. Hopefully most of you are thinking of proposing. If you're not thinking about it, maybe someone around you can quiz you about things you do and help you decide, hey, that's really interesting. I don't know anything about that. Let's dig in on that and help you find a topic to speak on. We'd love to have everyone in this room submit abstracts, with the caveat that not everybody gets selected, but a lot do. A high percentage do. So take a moment and have a look, or have a discussion, and we'll get back with you.
And if anybody didn't get food yet, or you wanted another half of a sandwich.
All right. I want to say a couple things, though, just in closing. One is I walked around the room and was impressed. Everyone had really good topics. I think there's a lot of hope for a lot of you to get slides in. Someone came with an abstract, which is very impressive. Yes? City of Phoenix? So yeah, she was ready, which is great. And honestly, the quality of your abstract does go up, even if sometimes the reason we select a lot in the last minutes is because most of them come in at that point, right? But your quality goes up the more you have it reviewed, the more you have time to think about it, right? That's just going to happen. You might be laying in bed, you've already written the abstract, and you're like, man, I've thought of some great ideas, so I'm going to change some things up, and it's going to be even better. So that's one of the things I just want to acknowledge. Thank you all. Your ideas are great. I think you have some great potential out there. Another thing, I just want to thank the City of Peoria, I probably should have done this earlier, for being willing to host us and doing such a great job of setting up, especially Tawana and all those in the front row here, all our helpers. And I thank you for coming. Are there any questions or comments from your session today? Anything you wanted to cover?
When would they typically hear about like, their
Ooh,
abstract?
good question. So we usually start the review. We're always reviewing over Thanksgiving. That's kind of the tradition for some unknown reason. It's really hard to eat turkey and you get all the tiredness and you're reading these abstracts. But we do it about then. And I guess, do you remember, Bob, can you remember when?
Earlier this year, I think.
It is going to be earlier this year because the conference has moved earlier. So it'll probably be reviewing in early November maybe, right? Would you say? The October 11th deadline, they've got to sort and get all the abstracts, So what happens, I'll just give you the insight. So what happens is some poor soul gets all of these abstracts in a spreadsheet and then starts going through and kind of making sure everything's right. And then it puts it in a format where everyone can look at it and start judging. And then you got to take all the individual judges' scores and compile them, right? And then you get an average and you find out where's the cutoff. Is the cutoff 2.75? Anybody who has a score below that is out. So then they go through all that, and then once that's all done, we have to set up the tracks and figure out, okay, does everyone fit into a track, right? So here's the wastewater treatment track. We've got 2 full days, or maybe even 3 full days, and that's 7 spots this day, 8 spots the next day, and 5 spots the next day, something like that. So you figure out how's that all work, and then we finally send you your notification. So I'm going to guess it's probably going to be like first of the year next year. Maybe before that, but to be safe, I think that's fair. That's a long time before when you're presenting, right? Because we're not going to present till April. But still, you also know there's like I guess that's it. You'll get contacted by several people from the committee, including a moderator. Once you're selected, so.
If you're interested in volunteering to be a moderator where you
Oh, yeah.
introduce the speaker, you can volunteer for that, and also session monitors and other random volunteer opportunities. There's a link to register for those on the website as well.
Yeah. I saw, I just want to point out one. Somebody had the idea of La Cucaracha, right? And he was talking about he's having customer service issues with cockroaches, and this is his interesting topic. I mean, everybody loves to hear about cockroaches, the different types, right? I think it would be amazing, right? So hopefully nobody takes that. Nobody steal that, because
After lunch.
there's worse, believe me.
We won't let anybody
Believe
steal
me.
it. We get to review them.
Yeah, that's right. So he gets it. All right, well, anyway, thank you. No other comments or questions or thoughts? Okay. PDHs are in the back, so you can pick it up on your way out. Amy will have them. And one more announcement.
So what is review is the quality of the abstract, and once they're selected, then you decided which strains you're going to have?
Yeah, right. So once they make the cut, then we'll assign them to topics, right? So they have to get above the line, and we get all the abstracts that are above the line, and we say, okay, and it's a process because it's manual. There's no program that says, boom, they all go in these topics. Somebody has to go in and be like, okay, I'll put these 3 talks together here, these 4 here, and so that takes a little bit of time.
It's
I've done it before.
that someone has a better chance to get selected if they submit into, let's say, asset management.
Yes, there's a potential for that, right? Because if all the people writing asset management talk or presentations do really badly, they don't know how to communicate well, then it could be that you have a better chance. Or if there's only 3 and we have a spot for 5 or 7 or whatever it might be.
That's why it's important to pick a subcategory or multiple categories if you know it would fit. Because if they're putting a program together and a couple of talks go really great together and they're like, oh,
We have one opening.
one opening.
We'll
we're
pull
like,
it from-
oh, this one could go here, so.
Right.
put
So-
it in there.
So right at that line, there's going to be talks that'll say, oh, you know, somewhere in this line, we might pull somebody up because we have a need, right? Because, man, we were going to have a stormwater track. We only have 2 stormwater talks. We need at least 5 or 7 or whatever. So they'll pull it up. 4 or 7, I should say. Yeah.
At the end of the day, when you're submitting, you want to submit on a topic that you're familiar with, obviously. If you're going to do a presentation, you don't want to talk about something you're not familiar with.
Yeah.
Because it'll show,
Yeah.
in the abstract or at the presentation. So,
Yeah, and you might have done a lot of reading about somebody else's project, but probably it would be weird to present on that. I read about it in the paper. It was so interesting. I was going to talk about it. So, all right. Any others? Thank you so much. I appreciate y'all being here. You're out early, which is hopefully good for you. Thank you for coming.